In the world of Diablo, angels and demons fight for control in the eternal conflict. Let's just say the world isn't full of sunshine and rainbows. So stay a while and listen. I'm Jason with Curse, and let's talk Diablo 3. May 15th, 2012. After 11 long years, hundreds of thousands of people across the world logged onto Battle.net and booted up Diablo 3. Or they tried to, anyway. Most of them were greeted with the now infamous Error 37. Blizzard had broken records with Diablo 3 even before it launched. Pre-sale numbers were high, and first-day sales had totaled more than 3.5 million copies. By the end of the year, though, they would have sold more than 12 million. The legacy and hype for Diablo 3 was comparable to that of the Half-Life franchise. Years and years of waiting for fans before even a whisper of a sequel, only to have it crushed in the first 5 minutes. But it didn't just last for 5 minutes. Several days went by before Blizzard was able to solve these issues. In that time, Error 37 had become a meme enshrined in the internet for eternity. For fans, this was proof that Blizzard had made the wrong call. Even before the game had released, there had been talk about the Always Online mode, a big departure from that of Diablo 1 and 2, where they featured both online and offline. It didn't matter. As soon as players were able to finally log in, they were greeted by new Tristram and a new cast of heroes. Spells and abilities worked flawlessly, environmental detail was no joke. It all added up to what we've come to expect from Blizzard, the Blizzard polish. However, it wasn't long before more issues arose. See, the developers had implemented a series of increasingly hard campaigns, which worked well for Diablo 2, but in Diablo 3, they added a final difficulty mode, Inferno. The problem with Inferno was that it was extremely difficult, especially until you had the highest item level gear. A famous quote from then game director Jay Wilson:
internally, we had this super hardcore test team, and we got a lot of hardcore players at Blizzard that tested Inferno. And we got it to the point where they thought it was challenging enough, and then we doubled it. Because we knew that no matter how good we are, our players are going to be better. So we focused on making that as difficult as we could possibly make it.
So what were players to do? To progress in Inferno, you needed the best gear, but you couldn't progress to the later acts for the higher item level gear. This led to many people becoming stuck either in Act 1 or 2. Only the very few people who made it to Act 3 and 4 had access to the highest level gear, eye level 63 or so. And so, the desperate players turned to the last available source of progression, the auction house. Now, the auction house was a huge point of contention between the community and Blizzard. Many fans chalked it up to Blizzard being greedy, as they featured a real money auction house and Blizzard would receive a portion of the proceeds. Blizzard countered this, however, with perhaps legitimate concerns about the trading that happened in Diablo 2. Real money trading had also occurred there, often sending players to sketchy websites to make their trades. In Blizzard's eyes, they wanted to make it a world-class experience for everyone involved. In reality, however, it simply allowed the few players with items to become very wealthy both in gold and real-life cash. In addition, legendary items were virtually non-existent. Blizzard attempted to balance the drop rate of these powerful items around the fact that the auction house existed. They wanted the drops to be meaningful, but how is a drop meaningful if you can get a decently rolled legendary, but can easily go to purchase a much better one in the auction house? Now, to Blizzard's credit, after all of this had happened, they released patch after patch trying to keep people interested. The patches were free and ranged from nerfing some of the more infamous Inferno mechanics like invulnerable allies and the enrage timer, to more endgame focused changes like monster power, the Paragon system, and legendary item changes. Blizzard still knew the game wasn't quite where they wanted it to be though. Just as the Lord of Destruction expansion would herald a new era for Diablo 2, an expansion for Diablo 3 could do the same. Jay Wilson, the game director for the initial game, had already announced his departure from the team. It was a perfect time for new leadership, and that came in the form of Josh Mosquera. Josh had been working on porting Diablo 3 to consoles for some time. Under his leadership, with the chance to breathe new life into the game, they created a list of problems and began to work on solutions. Among the first of the proposed changes was a massive overhaul to the loot system and removal of the auction house. With no more auction house to balance around, the overall quality of loot improved, better items, and they were now heavily weighted to be useful for your class. No more strength bows or dexterity wands. The next big step was to begin to tackle the difficulty problem. Inferno had been a major source of contention, and while they had nerfed it repeatedly since release, it could still be better. In this case, they decided to scrap the previous model and suddenly take the monster power concept and expand on it. No longer would you need to play through the campaign multiple times, but rather the enemies would scale with you. The player would also have a difficulty slider from normal all the way up to torment, thus the players could participate at their own pace. If they wanted the extra challenge, they would be rewarded with increased loot drops and XP gain, but players would not be bound by item level any longer. Perhaps the most drastic change, however, was the addition of Adventure Mode. Once you'd beaten the last act in the game, you would unlock it. This allowed the player to venture to any area in the game with a set of bounties for each act. This not only increased the loot available to players, but offered them something to do that was familiar yet different. Additionally, as you would complete bounties, you would get special resources, some for crafting new items, but most notably the Nephilim Keystones. These keystones would unlock a new kind of randomly generated dungeon called Nephilim Rifts with assorted monsters from all throughout the game. And of course, the rifts were chock full of loot for the up-and-coming adventurers. These changes were bundled with a new act featuring Westmarch, a city entrenched in the lore, several new bosses, and the big baddie being Malthael, a fallen archangel representing death. They also added the Crusader class, bringing the total to 6. They christened it Reaper of Souls. All of these changes together renewed the faith players had in the Diablo franchise. Upon launch on March 25, 2014, there was no Error 37, nothing preventing players from jumping right into the action. Both the players and the devs could breathe easy on this one. Mistakes had been learned from, and Blizzard has continued to release free and paid content, including another class, the Necromancer. Diablo 3 and Reaper of Souls are also on consoles, both for Xbox and PlayStation, bringing its grimy monster slaughter to many more who had never managed to get their hands on the PC version. In total, across all platforms, Diablo 3 and Reaper of Souls have sold more than 30 million copies, and this was just as of 2015. Where Diablo sits now, however, is in a state of waiting. It has been over 4 years since Reaper of Souls made its appearance. So now we, the loyal fans, wait ever more for the next installment of the Diablo franchise. If you're interested in content like this, keep an eye out here for more, and be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comments below.